And this is what I love the most about our country. Not what happened during the Civil War, but why the Civil War happened and how the country was able to heal and move forward is because of our original core values. And it's our core values that I love.
The Salty Pastor Podcast is a ministry of Dr. Douglas Peake. It's designed to coach you up in your faith by giving you access to biblical insight, scholarship, and ministry experience of Dr. Peake that spans 38 years. Today is actually the 4th of July, 2024, and this is a special edition of the Salty Pastor Podcast for your listening enjoyment. Now, without further ado, please welcome the Salty Pastor himself, Dr. Douglas Peake.
Hey, everybody. Today, we are going to do a special podcast on freedom and liberty. You know, the Salty Pastor Podcast is currently doing a deep dive on this issue of identity. And during the research portion of that series, I began asking a really simple question. If identity is critical to an individual human being, can a nation have an identity? And if so, how is that identity formed? I mean, how is it preserved? How is it adapted? And how does it change or evolve as time goes on? So I thought it would be appropriate, since the episode of the Salty Pastor Podcast drops on the 4th of July this year, that we should do a special focusing on the national identity of the United States of America. So here is my question. Is it possible for a nation to have a national identity? And if so, where does our national identity come from? What does it mean to be an American? What is that American ethos, that identity that we can have in common? What does it actually mean to be a citizen of the United States of America? So the simple answer to the question, is it possible for a nation to have an identity, is yes, absolutely. All nations have a national identity. A nation's identity comes from the core values on which it was founded. For instance, in ancient Rome, the identity of Rome was the paterfamilias, the law, the way they advanced during the census every 5 years, all was about the paterfamilias. Why is that? Well, because Rome was founded by families, and they wanted to reinforce the strength and the power and identity of your family. In 7th and 8th century Europe, Charlemagne formed the Second Holy Roman Empire. He wanted to return to the military strength of the Roman Empire, but he wanted to base it not on the core values of ancient Rome, but the core values of the Roman Catholic Church. So he called it the Second Holy Roman Empire, which I kind of think is fascinating. All right. He wanted Christianity to be kind of the basis for how society operated. You look at the Mongolian invasion, Attila the Hun, and how they came, people don't realize the massive expanse of the Mongolian Empire during that period of time. It's a very short period of time, but boy, they conquered all kinds of stuff. They got all the way up to the plains outside of Vienna. And then many people think that that's when Attila died. And so everybody just packed up and left and went back home, which is really kind of interesting. But they had an entire identity as a nation. The Ottoman Empire. The people are not aware that the Ottoman Empire is one of the longest existing empires in the history of the world. And it built its entire empire on the values of Islam. If you look at the feudal system during that period of time in Europe, it was all built on monarchies. You had lords, you had dukes, you had kings, and the entire system was built on the core value of the divine right of kings. And so they were seen as something more. Their blood made them something more special than everybody else. They were at the top of the hierarchy, so to speak. It didn't matter how smart you were, didn't matter what your, social abilities were. It didn't matter how well educated you were. If you had that kingly blood in you, then you had the right to rule.
Right.
And boy, was that a disaster in a lot of ways. But the American Revolution came along in the 1700s, and it was a brand new experience known as self-governance. Now, we often spend most of our time teaching children and young adults how our republic works. How does democracy work? How do you have a division of powers and presidents and senators and representatives and the Supreme Court and the judiciary? I mean, it just goes on and on about like how in the world do we actually operate this massive thing? However, very little is taught about the core values on which our republic was built. And so I just want to read to you some of the core values of our early founding fathers. George Washington said, "Virtue or morality is a necessary spring of popular government." And what he meant popular, it's not the way we use the word popular, but it meant a government by the people and for the people.
Like a populace.
Yeah, exactly. Benjamin Franklin said, "Nothing brings more pain than too much pleasure. Nothing more bondage than too much liberty." Meaning liberty is not doing what you want, but having the freedom to do what you should. And he taught that religion guides men in this endeavor. Samuel Adams said this. He said, "Let divines and philosophers, statesmen and patriots unite in instructing citizens in the art of self-government. In short, of leading them in the study and practice of the extended virtues of the Christian system." You notice how he said the core values on which our republic is built is coming from these Christian ideals. Look at what Thomas Jefferson said. Thomas Jefferson is generally used by progressive and leftist people to say that, you know, he didn't like religion and he didn't really believe in Christianity. They say this all the time, which is kind of odd when you hear the following quote from him. "Can the liberties of a nation be thought secure when we have removed their only firm basis, a conviction in the minds of people that these liberties are the gift of God and they are not to be violated, but with his wrath?" Isn't that interesting?
Yes.
He's saying these liberties of our nation are secure in the firm basis, and that is a conviction that there is a God and he will hold us morally accountable. I think that's amazing. James Madison said the following: "The belief in an all-powerful, the belief in a God, all-powerful, wise, and good is essential to the moral order of the world and to the happiness of men." Sam Adams again said this: "The doctrine of a supreme, intelligent, wise, almighty sovereign on the universe is the great essential principle of all morality and consequently of all civilization." John Adams said, "Our Constitution is made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other." As president, he said, "Science, liberty, and religion have an inseparable union, and without their joint influence, no society can be great, flourishing, or happy." Alexander Hamilton, on which they have that new musical that's really popular, Hamilton.
Yeah, it's been out for.
He said the following: "The anti-religious force it unleashed annihilates the foundations of social order and true liberty. It confounds all moral distinctions and substitutes for the mild religion of the gospel a gloomy, persecuting, and desolating atheism." So Alexander Hamilton himself said that, you know, it's dangerous to be atheistic and anti-religious in our republic. George Washington, let's conclude with him. "Of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. In vain would that man who claims patriotism, who should labor to subvert these great pillars of human happiness, these firmest props of the duties of men and citizens."
I mean, those quotes are really great. And actually, it reminds me of an episode you did a while back that has some other good information that kind of relates to this. So let's watch that clip really quick.
"Which the power of the people is supreme, has liberty any abode." In other words, liberty will only live in states where the power of the people is supreme. There's no centralized control. There's no dictator, autocrat, king, monarch, any of these things. F.A. Hayek, he lamented that society in America was abandoning the basic individualism inherited by us from Erasmus to Montaigne, from Cicero to Tacitus, Pericles, and Thucydides. So it's really interesting to me is that even Hayek realizes that in America, the biggest danger that we have to our own personal liberty is when the society abandons this revelatory definition of what it means to be a human being. The founding fathers' frame of reference.
I mean, it's pretty obvious that our founding fathers believed in core values of liberty and freedom based on all of these quotes you've just read, right? So in your opinion, how have these core values influenced our nation, even when we're maybe off track or do things wrong, which some would argue is maybe what we do more of lately than not?
That is a great point. And I think what's so interesting about that is the following, and that is so a lot of people look back at our history and they take the flaws and mistakes that America has committed, which there's been many. No
Right.
historian admits that. And they try to use that to show how the original core values are flawed. But this is really anti-intellectual. It's anti-scholarship. It's just silly, right? It's just silly because the question is you're comparing the mistakes of the nation to some perfect utopia that you think can exist, and nothing like that has ever existed. So take the issue of slavery. The issue is did America participate in chattel slavery? Absolutely it did. But so did every other nation for 5,000 years or 7,000 years. Chattel slavery, well, actually, originally it wasn't chattel slavery. It was just poverty slavery, and that is they would enslave people based on economic status. So if you were poor, you were enslaved, right? Chattel slavery, meaning the taking of people because they have a distinct ethnic background, that didn't start until the 1600s when there was finally international shipping that started, right? Because there's no way to transport slaves at all. But taking slaves, I mean, it was from day one, basically, of the human recorded civilization. So the issue that Americans participated in that is silly. To use that as a criticism is silly when the entire world is doing that and accepting it. The real question is, why did they end it? How did they end it? And what was the impact? You see, that's really the main question when you look at any nation's flaws, right? Historically, it isn't that they had flaws, it's how they respond to them. And this is important to understand. When we talk about identity, right, we talk about an individual. And what we realize is every individual life has conflict, obstacles, and setbacks, right? And the issue is your identity, as you grow it stronger, especially if you've received a new identity from Christ, allows you to deal with those conflicts in a way that not only helps you persevere and endure, but actually go stronger in the process, right? You become more mature. So suffering can actually help you deepen your meaning in life. It can actually help you deepen your purpose in life. So in the same way, every conflict in America's history needs to be seen through its national identity. And conflicts do one of two things in your life, is the same as they do in your nation, is they either force you to abandon really bad core values or they cause you to return to your original core values. So many people look back at the injustices throughout American history and try to say, look, our original core values are bad. However, what they're doing is they are using a flawed lens in which to view the conflicts, because every individual life has conflicts. Every single nation has flaws and conflicts. You could call these wars. And so The question is whether it's an external war or an internal war. The question is, how did the nation arise and deal with that?
Right.
That's really the main question historically. For instance, during the War of 1812, very similar to the Civil War, both conflicts were devastating. The Civil War was worse, but in both conflicts, America returned to its core values on which it was founded. For instance, what gave the early patriots during the Revolutionary War the conviction that they could be independent of the British king? It was a new national identity, right? Right. What gave the new America the belief it could fight the British and win the War of 1812? Well, it was their national identity. What gave America and President Lincoln the conviction that there shouldn't be two separate Americas, where one allowed the enslavement of people, which was a violation of the Constitution? It was our original core values. What gave America the conviction to extend voting rights to women in 14 or 1916? Well, it was our original core values. What gave America the ability to judge those who hid behind the government and infected men with syphilis and other diseases, during that in the early 20th century? It's a horrible thing there in Tuskegee and a bunch of other things that they did to African Americans. Is horrible. But we brought those people to justice and we uncovered that and righted that wrong. Well, it was our original core values that did that. What gave America the resolve to fight in World War II and win? Our original core values. What gave America the conviction that during the civil rights movement that all men are created equal in Jim Crow laws? There were a few states in the South who had Jim Crow laws, and we determined that they were illegal, right? How did we do that? Our original core values. It is the same answer for every conflict we've ever had. The core values of our founding fathers were reinforced to be true, to be accurate, to be just, and the power on which America can advance. The Constitution of the United States of America is the mechanism designed to preserve the core values of our founding fathers. Okay? That's what it's there for. And this is what I love the most about our country. Not what happened during the Civil War. I don't love that. But why the Civil War happened and how the country was able to heal and move forward is because of our original core values, and it's our core values that I love. No one understands what a miracle that was, right? To be able to bring the country back together and heal it. You look at other nations and countries, they're still divided, even after they come together. It's just constantly division and fighting and war. It's happening all the time. But America was able to come back together and heal. Why? Because of the beauty and wonder and perfection of our original core values. When Jim Crow laws were passed, I think that was terrible, right? Even if it was a few states, I thought it was terrible. But it was our core values that were preserved in the Constitution that allowed for that injustice to be remedied. And that's what I love about America. And this is why I look at what's happening today. And this is where I get really concerned. Okay, I'm very concerned because for the first time in the history of America, we have a massive movement within our nation of people who say that the core values on which our nation is built are evil and must be destroyed. Right? They want to overturn the Constitution. They want to overturn the Declaration of Independence. They want to overturn the core values that has allowed this country to become what it is and to overcome all of the injustices that it perpetuated throughout history. Okay? You see these things cropping up in things like critical race theory. The leaders of critical race theory say over and over again that the original core values of America are absolutely corrupt and evil. You see this in the Marxist philosophy that has taken root in our universities, especially as it applies to economics. They say that things like free market and the fact that you as a person owns your own labor and you should be free to choose where you're going to apply it and what you're going to charge for it should be eradicated, and that we should have a communist or socialist economy, even though it is proven to fail everywhere it has been tried. This new gender identity is the ideology is an attack on the core values of our nation. And what it's trying to do is get people, is forcing people in a fascist way to accept something that is biologically, scientifically proven to be false. Okay. But you can still lose your job if you are opposed to it. How can a nation self-correct? How can a nation heal the conflicts when the conflict is over its core values? Can you practice the core value that you have a right to come and live in America and practice whatever religion you want when your religion expressly teaches you to kill people who don't believe or follow your religion? Is that possible? Is it possible to have a nation when, as George Washington said, we have to be a religious and moral people? John Adams said the same thing. Our republic, our Constitution only functions with a moral and religious people when atheism, scientific materialism, and secularism rules the day. Can our republic survive? Because what they're doing is they're attacking the core values that have allowed us to overcome injustice and continue to heal the nation.
Yeah, I mean, I think these are some great questions that you're posing, and with all of these ideas you've brought forward, it's pretty easy to tell that our nation is struggling right now, and we're kind of at a point where we're starting to having to look at, well, if we don't make a choice soon, it's not looking great. And it seems like everything's all about power and how to force other people to comply with you so that they think or say or do what you want them to do. That's what it feels like everything is kind of turned into. And what I would like you to kind of speak to, Pastor, is how are Christians supposed to address this conflict without just turning into another person trying to convince people to comply?
Well, in order to know what to do, I think we need to know who we are. We should always start there. Matthew 5:13, Jesus says the following: "You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt has become tasteless, how can it be made salty again? It is good for nothing except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men." In verse 14, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Nor does anyone light a lamp and put it under the basket, but on the lampstand, and it gives light to all who are in the house. Let your light shine before men in such a way that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven." We are the salt of the earth. We are the light of the world, okay? And I think it's imperative that we continually uphold the basic core values of Christianity. And here's what's really interesting. I'm not talking about cultural Christianity. I'm not talking about the denominational Christianity. I mean, the real basic foundational stones of Orthodox Christianity. Because when you zero in on just those very basic truths, right, what you find when you know what those are, what you find, it's easy to support the core values of our founding fathers. Why? Because they took their core values from Christianity. I've said this so many times, I want to say it again. Christianity is separate from the constitutional republic of America, right? If you're an American citizen, that does not make you a Christian in any shape or form, okay? They're completely separate. Because Christianity predates America by 1,750 some years. However, it's really important to understand America could not and would not exist without the soil and the foundation of Christianity. Some of those foundational rocks from Christianity that are necessary for America to actually exist is, number one, the definition of what it means to be a human being. It's that definition that allowed our founding fathers to write, "All men are endowed with their creator with unalienable rights. All men are created equal." That is a uniquely Christian principle that comes directly from the scriptures. Number two, the doctrine of non-coercion. All people have freedom to choose to believe or not to believe. And this is the whole notion of you can pursue life, liberty, and your own pursuit of happiness. You should have the freedom to choose, right? Number 3, when you look at our justice system, it all comes from Christianity in its teaching that all human beings are moral creatures, right? And so we have to have a justice system. And that justice system, because all human beings are moral creatures, they are also flawed. And so the justice system has to basically restrain humanity in a fair, equitable, and blind manner. You don't want different strains of justice. You want it to be fair and equal. So I think it's important to understand for everybody, when you celebrate the 4th of July, you are celebrating the core values of what made the country great. What can fix this country when it gets off track, what allows the country to adjust to future times, and it allows it to evolve. It gives the core values are what give our country a hope and a future. And so it's all about, our core values. The answer to our division right now is our core national values. So when you say God bless America, you are simply asking God to help us stay aligned with the core values that made this nation great in the first place.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Pastor, for giving this wonderful episode dedicated to a study on America's identity. And we love that it's on the 4th of July. We're all probably out celebrating right now in our own ways, and we're excited for that. And I hope that you guys just have a wonderful, safe day. If you're listening to this and this has spoken to you, make sure you leave a like or subscribe on YouTube. It helps us grow grow on the platform so that more people can capture this and see this, so that it might make an impact in their lives. If you're looking for more information about America or various other topics we've covered, make sure you head on over to thesaltypastor.com, and you can use our database to kind of search through all the crazy all the different topics. It's a crazy amount of topics is what it really is. And that we have covered, and passages that we've quoted directly that will allow you to do deeper dives on things that you may be studying. So while you're there, if you're feeling led, make sure you donate, because that will help us continue to grow this ministry. We have some cool things that we're playing around with as ideas, but they might take a little bit of money to get off the ground. So we're hoping that you guys will help us get there, and we'll be talking a little bit more about those in the future. But until then, have a wonderful 4th of July, and we'll see you next week here on the Salty Pastor Podcast.
Hey, happy 4th of July, and let freedom ring.